Sony can brick your PS4 anytime they want. If you guys haven't heard yet, there's this really wild controversy going on with the PS3, PS Vita, and PSP, where this coming July and August, Sony is going to shut down the stores for those consoles, and you will not be able to purchase any new games or DLC. Now, this is a pretty big issue in itself, but there's a ton of developers who are really confused and honestly getting pretty pissed because they're developing games currently for the Vita. It's dead here in America, but over in Japan, there are actually a fair few games still coming out for that console. So yeah, if you're making a game for the PS Vita and Sony hasn't communicated to you that the store is going to be dead before your game ever comes out, it's going to be pretty hard to make money on your game in the first place. And on the PS3, it's even worse because even if you manage to download all of your games to the console and all the DLC you're ever going to want to play before the store shuts down, you can still lose access to all that stuff very easily. It comes down to the fact that the PS3 essentially uses the clock to verify that the digital games you own are legitimate. So if that clock loses connections to Sony's server for too long, then you're not going to be able to play any of the stuff you have downloaded. So say in like 5 or 6 years, Sony decides that it's not worth it anymore to keep the servers running for the PS3, which it might not happen that soon, but it's definitely going to happen one day, and they say, yeah, we're just going to shut it off. You have no more access to the games that you bought. And of course, I gotta mention it, this wouldn't be an issue if Sony had some system in place for you to be able to play Vita, PS3, and PSP games on your PS5, but for some reason, despite the fact that they have virtually no games for the console right now, it's not a priority. They don't want to let you play old games unless they're for PS4. If you want a more detailed explainer on this, there's a video on the channel from earlier in the week, but if you want to catch these things as soon as we post them, you gotta make sure you're PS ready and subscribe with your notifications set to all. So while all of this was happening with the old consoles, people were like, man, it's good that nothing is going on with the PS4, but because a lot of indie devs have had their time in the spotlight this week since they're basically the experts on how all this stuff works, some pretty major vulnerabilities with the PS4 have come to light. Something that was news to me is that just like the Game Boy cartridges we used to have back in the day, shout out to all you 90s kids out there, the PS4's motherboard actually has a battery on it. It's a watch style battery called a CMOS battery. Essentially what that battery is for is to power an internal clock on the PS4's motherboard that Sony uses as a form of DRM. So basically what it's for is if you download a game early that has preloading and then you change the clock on your PS4's OS, it checks it with the clock on the internal motherboard, and if those are out of sync, you're not going to be able to play that game early or anything. Another thing people use to do with the PS3, I think, is they would change the time on the console and make it so it looked like they got trophies a lot earlier or later than they did. So Sony was like, we're just going to nip that in the bud with the PS4 and make sure this battery has an internal clock powered that won't let you do any of this crazy stuff that all the trophy hunters are doing. So if you have preloaded games and you've ever gone in and tried to change the clock, that's why you can't just play them earlier than you originally could. So the good news here is that if that CMOS battery dies, if your PS4 is connecting to the PSN frequently, it won't actually lock you out from playing any of your digital games. But a few years down the road, when Sony releases the PS6 and they decide it's not worth keeping the PS4 and PS4 Pro online anymore, and they turn off the PSN access for those consoles, if your CMOS battery is dead and you go to replace it, it'll have to do that one-time check with the PSN again. The PSN's down, so it can't do it, and then bam, none of your games are playable ever again. And now you're probably sitting there saying, well, I was smart and I bought all my PS4 games on disc. And I'm gonna tell you that you're wrong because A, a lot of PS4 games, especially late in the generation, would only come with like half the game on the disc, and then you'd have to download the entire thing again and wait for it to copy to your hard drive. And also, if the battery dies, it kills disc playback too, so you can't even use it as a Blu-ray player anymore. It doesn't make any sense, it's terrible. This has been a conversation for a while, especially when it comes to digital games, because when you buy these digital games, you're not actually buying a copy of the game, you're buying a license to play it. So Sony theoretically could just lock everyone out one day and say no more digital games, or they could be nice and just open it all up so that you can play pirated games or whatever the hell you want on the console. Valve specifically has said with Steam, if it ever comes to the point where Steam needs to be shut down, they'll just unlock all the games on it for everyone so there's no DRM checks anymore. It's a weird legal gray area basically because we've not really ever gotten to that point yet. I suppose the good thing here is that you can access the battery in the PS4 and just replace it whenever you want, and it's actually pretty cheap and easy to do, but it's weird to know that if you have a PS4 and you're hanging on to it for like posterity or game preservation, that thing has a built-in expiration date and there's nothing you can really do about it. But this whole situation makes a great case for something I'd love to bring up all the time, which is backwards compatibility with old consoles on the PS5, you know? It would be great if we could play these older games past PS4 on the PS5, because then we wouldn't have to worry about any of this stuff in the first place. And I know this sounds like a slow news day type of story or whatever, but I think it's good to always bring this stuff up because the companies who make these game consoles and make the games, they always want to do the bare minimum to make money. So if we're sitting here complaining that there's no backwards compatibility on the PS5 and letting them know that, yeah, it is a problem that the Xbox has it going back all the way to the first original console and you stop at the last gen one, they're gonna have to like do something about it. They're gonna have to sit down and say, all right, enough people are complaining about this that I think it's making us lose money, so we should just figure out how to emulate PS3, PSP, PS Vita, PS2, and PS1 games. It will happen eventually because now enough people are talking about it. And yeah, you can say that it's mostly influenced by what I just said about Microsoft, but at the end of the day, the fact that we're making Sony aware of it by doing videos like this, that's important. We saw a reactive Sony in the PS4 generation after they got way too confident between the PS2 and the PS3, and they really screwed things up in that generation. So Sony went out and made sure they had a ton of indie games. They were giving away some pretty good free games on PS Plus every month. They were reacting to Microsoft, and the longer they let Microsoft go out and buy all these big studios like Bethesda, have this awesome service with Game Pass, have this awesome backwards compatibility, they're noticing, I guarantee, that it's eating into their profits just a little bit, and that's going to get them to actually give us what we want. So yeah, it's not necessarily terrible that the PS4 has an expiration date. I know that you can probably just get around it in some way, and that if it ever gets to a point where the console is bricked, Sony will probably do the right thing and just open it up. But now I'd love to hear from you down in the comments below. Are you mad that there's a battery that could die on your PS4? Or are you like, nah, I don't really care, I got a PS5, I'm gonna play my PS4 games there. Also, if you want to stay PS ready, make sure you're subscribed with your notifications set to all. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.